Woodman here, Saturday, July 6, 2024. So today is a continuation of ideas that I have expressed in many previous videos. In particular, the concept I talked up with my son when one day I explained to him that I have ESP cognition in dreams. Now, most people have heard of that, right? Of psychics who can somehow predict the future. Of course, it's not a foolproof process, and the results are not always consistent. But it does happen, and there are many people that can do this. For me, for years, when I had these precognitive dreams, I had no explanation for it. I asked if there were psychics in the family who ever talked about such things, and initially I was told no. But then at some point, I was able to find some familial connection where that actually did occur. And so the way that I now am explaining it to my son, I basically told him this. I said, imagine that something has already happened in the future. And somehow I, from that future, want to ensure that the future comes to pass in a certain way. And so I send these images back to myself in the present, thus ensuring that the future outcome will occur. To which my son said, "Huh?" And of course I laughed. But I was being entirely serious. Because for me, random is not truly random, and even coincidence has an explanation. In previous videos, I talked about the idea of superposition and how when the wave function collapses at the point of observation and measurement, that we are then left with a singular reality. And perhaps that the many worlds interpretation, MWI, might be one way to handle this issue, because a superposition means that many different positions can exist simultaneously, but once they are observed or measured, as they say in the Highlander series of science fiction, there can be only one. However, the one that we are observing might well be because we are in a branched timeline that reflects that particular outcome. But there could be other universes where one of the other outcomes occurred, and we can't access those other universes, and we can't see what we don't have access to. But there are other ways, right? And maybe that's where dreaming comes in or meditation comes in. I've also talked about how in the quantum realm, things are reflected more in terms of statistical probabilities, and that outcomes are not as certain as they are in classical physics. Once again, that is until the wave function collapses. But once the wave function collapse has occurred, we can then use tools from classical physics rather than from quantum mechanics to explain the phenomena we are observing. This is reflected in terms of quantum decoherence. Quantum decoherence is the loss of quantum coherence. Quantum decoherence has been studied to understand how quantum systems convert to systems which can be explained by classical mechanics. The formulas that we use in classical physics can be applied either forwards or backwards in time, meaning that it is not just simply going linearly in one direction. We can explain the change from one state to another, whether we're looking at the past or looking at the future. Because of entropy, however, we cannot merely reverse time to get things back to their original state. Things may start in an orderly fashion, in other words, a state of low entropy, but then they tend towards chaos and disorder, which is high entropy. And then those changes are really not reversible. They appear to be one way. In other words, for example, the Big Bang. You know, everything was super compact and orderly, and then we have the bang, and now everything is expanding outwards. Now, looking at the National Institute of Health website, the Center for Biotechnology Information, we have an article that's called Neural Circuits Microtubule Processing, which is the brain's magnetic field and components of self-awareness. And I want to read the abstract of this article for you because it really ties into a lot of what I'm talking about today. The known theories discussing the essence of consciousness have recently been updated. This prompts an attempt to integrate these explanations concerning several distinct components of the consciousness phenomenon, such as the ego and qualia perceptions. Therefore, it is useful to consider that the latest publications on the Orch OR and semi-theories, which assume that quantum processing occurs in microtubules, and that the brain's endogenous electromagnetic field is important. The authors combine these explanations with their own theory describing the neural circuits realizing imagery. They try to present such an interdisciplinary, integrated theoretical model in a manner intuitively understandable to people with a typical medical education. In order to do this, they even refer to intuitively understandable metaphors. The authors maintain that an effective comprehension of consciousness is important for healthcare professionals for many reasons, because its disorders are frequent, medical symptoms in emergencies, during general anesthesia, and in the course of cognitive disorders in elderly people. So the authors emphasize the current possibilities to verify these theses regarding the essence of consciousness thanks to the development of functional brain imaging methods. Magnetoencephalography, all right, did I say that right? Transcranial magnetic stimulation, as well as clinical studies on the modification of perceptions and feelings by such techniques as mindfulness and the use of certain psychoactive substances, especially among people with self-awareness and identity disorders. Wow, that was a mouthful. The short of this 2021 article is about the fact that microtubules in the brain have led to the idea that the brain itself could be functioning as a quantum computer. And those microtubules are actually serving as qubits of a quantum computer. This because certain areas of consciousness and brain function don't seem to follow the ideas of classical physics, but can be better explained by ideas within quantum mechanics. The idea that the human brain, or maybe the brain of any other mammal for that case, might function as an organic quantum computer is fascinating, and it's complex as a hypothesis that has emerged from the intersection of neuroscience, quantum physics, and computational theory. This hypothesis is based on several observations and numerous theoretical considerations. The first of these considerations is the idea of quantum coherence. Quantum coherence refers to the ability of particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously, a principle central to quantum computing. Some researchers, such as Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, have proposed that microtubules in brain cells could support quantum coherence. These microtubules, part of the cell's cytoskeleton, might operate in a manner akin to quantum bits, known as qubits, in a quantum computer, potentially enabling the brain to perform highly complex computations which are beyond the realm of classical possibilities or capabilities. Let's talk about the next consideration, which is the efficiency of brain function. The brain's ability to process vast amounts of information efficiently, such as pattern recognition and decision making, sometimes exceeds the capability of classical computers. Quantum computing offers a potential explanation for this efficiency, as it can process and store information in ways that classical computers cannot, by exploiting phenomena like superposition as well as entanglement. Let's look at a third consideration: non-classical phenomena. Certain aspects of consciousness and brain function seem to defy classical explanations. For example, the integrated and holistic nature of conscious experience might be better explained by quantum entanglement, where particles remain interconnected regardless of distance. The fourth consideration here is going to be neural synchronization. Brain activities such as neural synchronization and the generation of consciousness could very well involve quantum processes. For example, the rapid and widespread synchronization of neural oscillations seen in the brain might involve quantum processes that allow for faster than light communication across neurons. Whoa. And this will be theoretically explained by quantum entanglement, right? Because with quantum entanglement, the distance doesn't really matter. And so therefore, you could exceed the speed of light because the two things remain quantum entangled and will continue to relay information to each other being quantum entangled. So let's talk about quantum biological effects. There's a growing evidence of quantum effects in biological systems, such as avian navigation as well as photosynthesis. This can provide a precedent that biological systems can indeed exploit quantum mechanics, making it plausible that the brain could do the same. The sixth consideration is quantum decision making. Some cognitive processes and decision-making strategies resemble quantum algorithms, which can operate on probabilities and uncertainties in ways that classical algorithms cannot. This resemblance suggests that the brain might be utilizing quantum-like processes to handle complex tasks. In other words, perhaps it is not just instinct, right? So then perhaps in the conversation I had with my son about my ESP precognition, what is going on is that we have a temporal paradox. Because this would mean causality can work not just forwards, but also backwards. The output can explain the input, which is counterintuitive, because this means quantum computing would have the power to predict things backwards and forwards in time, and that time would become a shattered barrier, that we are not bound to information flowing only forwards. Take a second to reflect on that. That is huge. And so we could use quantum computers to tell us information about what's going to happen next, which would be a mind-blowing game changer. Let's talk about an experiment involving photons and weak measurement, right? Because we've talked about in the past that the wave function collapses at a point of measurement, which we'll kind of say is really strong measurement. But scientists are finding ways to do weak measurement, which would not create this collapse, right? So experiments involving weak and strong measurements of photons. Experiments in quantum mechanics often involve understanding how measurements can influence the state of particles. One intriguing set of experiments involves photons being weakly measured before being strongly measured, demonstrating how future measurements can affect the past states of these particles. Interesting, right? So let's talk about weak and strong measurements. Weak measurement is a type of quantum measurement that only slightly disturbs the system, providing limited information about the state of the quantum system, which would allow researchers to gather information without collapsing the wave function completely. Wow. Mind-blowing, right? Strong measurement. This type of measurement significantly disturbs the system and collapses the wave function, providing definitive information about the state of the system. Wow, I'm getting this ringing in my right ear here. So I must be onto something, right? Because they say ringing is a good sign of things. So how would this experiment have been conducted? Let's talk about the experimental setup. In the discussed experiments, photons are beamed into a setup that splits them into two branches. Here's how that would work. We're going to have this photon beam splitting. And so we have a beam of photons which are split into two branches using a beam splitter. Then we're going to have a weak measurement point, which means at an earlier point in time, weak measurements are conducted on the photons in both branches. This measurement only provides partial information about the photon state and doesn't significantly disturb it, meaning that we have not collapsed the wave function at that point. So now we have a fork in the path. The photons continue along their respective paths after the weak measurement, which barely disturbs them. Now we have strong measurement in one branch. In one of the branches, a strong measurement is performed at a later point in time. This collapses the photon's wave function and provides definitive information about its state. The other branch doesn't get the strong measurement because we want to see what happens with a weak measurement and then a later strong measurement, and we want to see what happens with a weak measurement and then no subsequent strong measurement. So what were the observations and results of this experiment? The strong measurement had an impact on that particular branch of the photon beam. When a strong measurement is performed on the photons in one branch, it influences the earlier weakly measured photons. You heard it right. It influences the earlier weakly measured photons. The results of the earlier weak measurements are amplified, indicating that the future strong measurement affected the past state of the photons. You heard it from me, and you heard it here first. Affected the past state. As to the branch which had no strong measurement, the earlier weak measurements do not show any amplification. This indicates that without the future strong measurement, the past weak measurements would remain unchanged. So therefore, it is as if time is working in reverse, because we got an outcome that went back and it changed the earlier state during the means, right? And so that brings us to the concept of retrocausality. In retrocausality, future events, strong measurements, can influence past events, which are weak measurements. This challenges the conventional notion of time and causality. You see, this is where my dream came in, right? Because my dream told me to look at this. Quantum information. The experiments demonstrate how quantum information can be stored and retrieved in non-classical ways, emphasizing the unique properties of quantum systems. Wave function and measurement. The findings highlight the complex relationship between measurement and the wave function in quantum mechanics, showing that the act of measurement itself can influence the state of a quantum system in a non-intuitive manner. What does that mean, non-intuitive manner? It means that we expect time to flow forwards, and we affect the means to affect the ends, not the other way around. That's why it's non-intuitive. So what's the conclusion of these experiments? These experiments shed light on the peculiar nature of quantum mechanics, where measurements can have far-reaching implications on the state of particles across time. By demonstrating how future measurements can influence past weak measurements, they challenge our understanding of causality and time in the quantum realm. So perhaps Ant-Man and Quantum Mania was onto something, right? Because when Ant-Man goes to the quantum realm, he's able to come out at different points in time, and time doesn't work the same way it does in the quantum realm. So that science fiction that was introduced into those Marvel comics appears to be based on something that is an actual real concept. Retrocausality is a concept in physics and philosophy suggesting that future events can influence the present or past. This idea, often found in discussions of time travel and quantum mechanics, challenges the traditional linear cause and effect relationship, where causes precede effects. I want to go more into an explanation of retrocausality and what are the implications of it, now that we've already talked about the brain as a quantum computer, and we've also talked about the photon splitting experiment. So understanding retrocausality. The basic concept is that retrocausality posits that events in the future can affect events in the past. This implies a bidirectional influence of time. Bidirectional, where the arrow of causation doesn't strictly flow from the past to the present to the future, but can also flow backwards. This is kind of like that Star Trek episode, All Good Things, I believe, and they talk about anti-time, where something that Captain Picard does actually affects things back in time. So retrocausality can be linked to certain interpretations of quantum phenomena. For instance, the transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics proposed by physicist John Cramer involves a handshake between advanced waves traveling backward in time and retarded waves traveling forward in time. This interpretation suggests that quantum events can be influenced by conditions set in the future. And that's what Q was trying to get Picard to understand when he subjected them to those events where Picard kept looking for something and in so doing it changed the future, which then changed the past. Delayed choice experiments. There are those that were conducted by the physicist John Wheeler, which demonstrate that decisions made in the present can influence the behavior of particles in the past. In a classic delayed choice experiment, the way a photon behaves as either a wave or a particle can be influenced by a measurement decision made after the photon has already entered an interferometer. So what are the implications of retrocausality? The first is the causal loop, which was what was being projected to me in the dream, right? Retrocausality introduces the possibility of causal loops, where an event is both a cause and an effect of another event. For example, if a person receives information from their future self, acts on it, and then sends that information back, it creates a loop where cause and effect are intertwined, right? And this is what I was explaining to my son, that future me impacted present me. And that's why I'm doing these videos now, because future me wanted me to do these videos, as strange as that sounds. Philosophical considerations. Retrocausality challenges our conventional understanding of time and causation. It raises questions about free will, determinism, and the nature of temporal order. If future events can influence the past, it blurs the line between predetermined, I cannot talk today, and freely chosen actions. In other words, are we predestined to do things and thus have no free will to change it? That is a very interesting concept right there. What are the practical implications? Some people still feel retrocausality is largely theoretical. Even though it's been observed in microscopic systems, the implications for fields like quantum computing and communication are profound. It suggests a potential new ways of transmitting information and solving complex computational systems. Imagine that we can get information from the future and use that to maybe, like as a safety feature, right? What if you could have a car that's going to go into an accident and the airbag could deploy well before the accident actually occurs, which makes things even better. The idea that the ends explains the means in the context of retrocausality means that the outcomes in the future can justify or explain the processes and events leading up to them, even if those processes are influenced by future outcomes. This notion turns the traditional ethical and logical perspective on its head, suggesting a teleological approach where the future goals can shape past and present actions. And of course, teleological is a more past concept, but it is almost pretty much the same as what we now know as retrocausality. Challenges and controversies. Experimental evidence. Direct experimental evidence for retrocausality is still lacking, especially in macroscopic systems. Most discussions are based on interpretations of quantum phenomena and theoretical models. In other words, we've definitely observed this with photon behavior, but have we seen this on a larger scale? Well, maybe with ESP, but then, like I said, not everybody believes in ESP, and there are skeptics, and it's not a perfect process. What about conceptual challenges? Well, retrocausality raises significant conceptual challenges because it conflicts with our everyday experience of time and causality, requiring a radical rethinking of temporal dynamics, and that might even impact entropy itself. What are the ethical implications? Well, future events can influence the past. It complicates ethical considerations. Actions taken with knowledge of future outcomes could be seen as either justifiable or manipulative, depending on the perspective. So what is our conclusion here? And I know this video has gone on for quite some time, but I really had this download and this research to share with you all because this is very fascinating stuff. Retrocausality is a fascinating concept that pushes our boundaries of our understanding of time, causation, and the fundamental nature of reality. Retrocausality offers intriguing possibilities for future research and philosophical exploration. The notion that future events can influence the past challenges traditional views and opens up avenues for thinking about the interconnectedness of time and existence. Imagine if you could see everything in 4D, right? And you're looking over it and you're seeing the X and the Y and the Z and then the time. And you could just see everything and you could therefore extrapolate that information. That would be incredible, right? Did I blow your minds? Well, in discussing many of these things, like I said, a week ago I knew nothing about any of this. I dreamed about myself time traveling and then saying in the future, in the dream, oh no, I meddled with time and I broke the causal loop. So the future was telling me to research these ideas, and I predicted that I would be talking with you all about these ideas on my channel, which then leads to the paradox, which is the cause? Was it that I was always meant to research this subject area and talk about this subject matter? Or was it that the future meddled with the past and prompted me to take up this work looking into it? I'll give you an example. What if I didn't stumble upon this field until maybe 10 years from now in the original timeline? But a future me decided to accelerate the process, rush things along, and meddled, getting me to explore this subject area 10 years sooner. That is part of things that make you go, which would mean there are at least two realities at this point. The one where maybe it took me 10 years to actually stumble upon this subject and study this and bring you this message. And the one now, which is the altered timeline branch, where I saved myself a decade by meddling. Something to really think about. I hope you've enjoyed this message. If you're new here, welcome aboard. This is a safe space. If you're returning, I thank you so much. You're what makes this channel possible. Please like, share, and subscribe. I love you all. I love you. I love you. Have a wonderful and blessed Saturday. Take care.